because you have been randomly selected to take part in a secret mission regarding one of the most dangerous criminals in the country. I'm here to get you started before we officially launch the Operation Rogue Gamma Beta. Are you ready and willing to potentially sacrifice your life for this mission? Good. Glad to have you on the team. Listen carefully as I explain why we need your help. This notorious criminal has been ruining people's lives for decades, but we haven't had enough information to track him down. That is until now. They call him the Seam-Carver. I'm sure you've heard all about it, but what he does to his victims is unspeakable. See for yourself. These 3 victims have been seam-carved. Sadly, there is no cure. That's why our mission is to stop the Seam-Carver before he reaches another victim. Our engineers have cracked his evil code, but that is just the first step. To catch the Seam-Carver, we must think like the Seam-Carver. Now I will explain to you how the Seam-Carver resizes his victims. There is no going back after this. Are you sure you want to continue? Excellent. Let's get started.
Seam carving is an algorithm used in content-aware image resizing. It can be explained in 4 steps. 1. Creating an energy image. 2. Generating a cumulative energy map. 3. Finding the seam. And 4. Removing the seam. The image can be resized either vertically or horizontally, and the same algorithm can be used. You just have to transpose the image. Step 1 is getting the gradient from the image. This is a calculation of the first derivative in the x and the y direction summed up. This can also be called an edge detection function. We want this because the edges will be the areas that have the most energy, since humans are the most sensitive to the changes there. Our goal is to remove the places with the least energy, but we'll get to that a bit later. As you can see here, this is the gradient of this image. The edges are high intensity, while the smooth parts are low intensity. Using this, we can compute a cumulative energy map, which tells us how much energy is stored. A pixel in the energy map, M, is the corresponding pixel in the energy image, plus the minimum value of its 3 nearest neighbors in the row above it. Obviously, the first row will be identical to the first row of the energy image because there is no row above it. For the next row, however, here is a visual example. We can see that for the pixel value 2, we check the top 3 nearest neighbors for the smallest value. In this case, it's 5. So then we take that and we add it, and that will be the value in the corresponding pixel of the energy map. And we can do this until we have reached the bottom of the image. Next, we need to find the seam with the least amount of energy. Now that we have an energy map, we can figure out the path with the least energy by just going back up the rows. So in this case, the minimum value was 14. Then we look to the 3 nearest neighbors again, and see that the next minimum value is 9. Similarly, we can continue to do this until we have reached the top of the image, and the locations of those values we choose will define our seam. Now that we found the locations of the pixels in the seam, we need to remove the seam to resize the image. This can also be shown in Excel. Here we have the same image, where the seam that we created is marked in red. Now, to take the seam out, what we can do is take the first part of the bottom row before the marked pixel and put it in our upper. And then we take the last part of the bottom row after the marked pixel and put it in the lower. Then we can create this new dummy variable just to replace the marked pixel. So we can then concatenate the upper with the lower pixels and place the dummy variable at the end. And we will do this for all the rows in the image until we get to the top row again. So as I said before, we can separate them into upper and lower, and then rearrange or concatenate these pixels in a different order, while leaving a dummy variable at the end to replace the pixel that we lost over here. So in this case, we have an image that will look like this, and it will have zeros on its last column. Then what we can easily do is just take all these zeros and delete the column. So now we have effectively reduced the size of an image by one column.
In the end, we discovered that this algorithm could be used for good instead. Content-aware image resizing can be extremely useful when resizing images with lots of empty space. For example, this picture of the surfer and the wave. The space with low energy is represented by the water, while the high energy is represented by the white waves and the surfer. This example is very interesting because if you do it dynamically, it seems like the wave is getting closer and closer. At the end of the day, it works best on images that are of landscapes rather than portrait images of people. Also, with further study, there could be an experiment designed to test the limits of how far the image can be resized before it starts to become too distorted. It can be measured with a JND experiment to determine what threshold value of rows or columns reduced results in just the noticeable difference of distorted versus still acceptable or still resembling the original image. But we don't have time for that right now. Quick, someone's coming. Destroy the evidence.